Our next speaker is Glenn Wahl, JCC geology instructor, Cattaraugus, Chautauqua for Clean Waters and representing the League of Women Voters. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting this session. I do need to do a disclaimer first. I see in the program I was listed as a JCC geology instructor. I am indeed one of those, but I'm certainly not representing JCC's views on hydrofracking or anything of the sort. These are my own views. While I don't have the expertise of some on this panel, I do hold degrees in geology and environmental biology and have spent hundreds of hours researching the topic. Tonight I would like to explore three topics. First, to compare and contrast between the two main kinds of hydrofracking, since that seems to be a source of confusion locally. Second, to take a look at some of the impacts in recent studies. And third, to examine some effects fracking is already having on New York State, despite the moratorium. Everything I say tonight has cited sources supporting it, and if you would like to email me, my address is on the handout that I had put on your desks, and I'd be glad to send you a digital copy. That way you can just click on any of the citations and read it for yourself. So let's get started. One thing I've noticed at two recent local meetings on fracking is that the audience seems to view conventional drilling in fracking and unconventional drilling in fracking as the same thing, and regards any opposition to HVHF, the unconventional kind, which is under a statewide moratorium presently, also as opposition to conventional, which is not under moratorium statewide. But these two types of fracking, though they share some similarities, are not the same thing, and the opposition to fracking locally, statewide, nationwide, and worldwide is to the newer kind, the high-volume hydraulic fracturing, which currently supplies about 35% of our natural gas and oil. So when I use the terms vertical or conventional, that refers to the older kind that there is essentially no opposition to. When I use the terms high-volume hydraulic fracturing, HVHF, or unconventional, those refer to the new kind that has indeed earned itself the opposition it receives. HVHF, the newer kind of fracking, first took place on a production scale in the Barnett shale in Texas in 1997 and in the Marcellus shale here in the Northeast, depending on which source you read, in 2003 or 2004. And it wasn't until 2005 that it ramped up into the massive industrial activity it is today. And massive is the operational word, as Kim showed. Each well requires typically several million gallons of water, as opposed to around 50 to 100,000 for conventional, several hundred tons of sand, and several hundred tons of chemicals. So a typical HVHF well includes vertical drilling, transitioning to lateral or horizontal drilling, fracking the lateral section, and using a mix of chemicals such as biocides, friction reducers, rust inhibitors, gelling agents, and others. Databases show drillers choose from about 600 different chemicals, about half of which are toxic, and tailor the mix to the target formation. HVHF requires far more friction-reducing chemicals to allow the frac fluid to be injected successfully through the wellbore into the fractured rock, even with 15 to 19 1,000 horsepower diesel pumps pushing it over 10,000 psi. It's the quantity, which is about 100 times greater than conventional wells, and to a lesser degree, the composition of these chemicals along with water and sand volume and lateral drilling that differentiates between conventional and HVHF. So there are distinct differences between conventional drilling and this newer kind. If there was no difference, then New York State would not be able to allow one and have a moratorium on the other, as it has for the past 6 years. And while we're dispelling myths, you might hear that HVHF is better since it reduces the number of wells in an area if one compares it to purely vertical wells. Well, let's be clear. One cannot do conventional drilling and fracking in unconventional formations. The permeability and strata thickness differences are far too great. So it's a false equivalency since vertical drilling is out of the question from the start with these formations. So what is it about this newer kind of hydrofracking that's causing all the fuss? After all, the old kind's been done for decades and is still being done daily without garnering much opposition. But with HVHF, there are several areas where we've seen serious impacts, though I only have time to touch upon a couple of these. First, there are inherent flaws in the cementing process that seals the outside of the well casing to the surrounding rock. Industry reports from several years ago have put the initial failure rate of these seals at about 5%, with the failure rate increasing with time so that at 30 years out, about 50% of the seals have failed. Newer data isn't reassuring, with last year's report from the PADEP showing a 6.9% failure rate in 2010 and an 8.9% failure rate in 2012, closely matching Cornell University's recent findings of 6.2 to 7.2% failure rates. These are all industry data. And in fact, the Society of Petroleum Engineers tell us that approximately 35% of all the existing wells are leaking. The problem with failed cement seals is that it allows contaminants, as Kim and Bill have mentioned, from the target formation to reach the surface. And indeed, the many studies done in this issue have shown that the closer a water well is to drilling activities, the greater the concentration it will likely have of methane from the target formation. While methane can be a naturally occurring contaminant in water, it has clearly been shown that drilling activity increases methane concentrations in water, whether or not it was present before drilling. And it's often more than just methane, as a recent University of Texas study shows, with the concentrations of heavy metals and radionuclides such as arsenic, barium, selenium, and strontium also increasing in drinking water the closer it is to drilling activities. This would be a good time to mention that one of the reasons we haven't seen more court decisions finding gas and oil companies guilty of contaminating water wells is not that it's not happening, but it is because direct causal relationships are so hard to prove. With things like the hypothesis that smoking causes cancer, it was easier. Researchers could combine chemicals from smoke with living tissues and watch the results in a petri dish. But it's impossible to see contaminants entering water supplies. This is similar to what happened in Cattaraugus County when West Valley Nuclear Fuel Services activities resulted in a spike of cancers and other health issues. But legally, it was near impossible to prove cause and effect. So though the courts won't generally conclude a direct cause and effect relationship, the strong positive correlation between drilling activities and contaminants in water supplies, especially in studies that used baseline data to show those had not been present in the water before drilling, tells us that fracking is not the safe process the industry portrays it to be. Confirmation of drilling activities having caused water well and other water contamination by state agencies, like the Pennsylvania DEP, also support this stance. Another source of confusion is the terminology. Supporters of HVHF often point to prominent studies or persons who have stated that fracking has not caused water contamination. And that's true, because in those situations, the person is using the term fracking in its narrowest sense, just to describe the instant of the rock being shattered, which of course doesn't cause problems. But the popular media and the public use the term fracking to mean all of the phases of HVHF, which certainly have caused many contamination issues. In addition to the problem of well casing seal failure I've mentioned, through the HVHF process, from completion to production to distribution, there are large emissions of methane into the atmosphere. Between natural and human-caused methane, it's human-caused, which is the greater volume. And of all the sources of human-caused methane, oil and gas production is the largest source at about 30%, with agriculture coming in second. So in the reductions of greenhouse gases, certainly it should be the oil and gas production that's the priority. But there hasn't been much progress in that area, and in fact, a recent study by Stanford and Harvard, which is supported by several other independent studies, shows that the EPA has underestimated the amount of methane released by about 50%. And while it's true that the transitions made recently from coal to natural gas, along with lower demand and along with the growth of renewables, has reduced greenhouse gases somewhat in this country, the large increases in HVHF and other fossil fuel use worldwide more than negate those savings. Plus, it cannot be truthfully said even that natural gas is the cleanest in terms of greenhouse gases. While it burns cleaner, leak rates are at about 4 to 8% or more, when they would have to be under 2.7% to have the same climate impact as coal. Another issue that has not improved much is what to do with the flowback. This is toxic fluid that comes up, as Kim mentioned, when the well is initially opened. and is composed of some of the original frac fluid that was injected, along with heavy metals and radionuclides from the target formation. Although the percentage of the original injected frac fluid that comes up varies greatly. Anywhere between 5 to 50% of the original volume comes up. But when that original volume is millions of gallons, and when we're talking about thousands of wells, both the amount of flowback that is returned to the surface and the volume of toxic fluid that remains in the well is gigantic. And while the industry points to increases in recycling flowback, as of now, it's pretty much the same as it's been, that most of the toxic fluids captured from fracking are either sent to wastewater treatment plants or re-injected into the ground in deep disposal wells. With the former, we've seen that the typical wastewater treatment plants cannot test for and remove enough of the various contaminants in the fluid. This has been made obvious in several ways. Two examples are from Pennsylvania, where Pittsburgh recently had to change the way it treats its drinking water since the river source it uses was becoming so heavily loaded with bromides from the upstream flowback treatment plants that it posed a health threat. A second example is where several western Pennsylvania streams were found to contain much higher than normal levels, in fact 66 times the established limits, of radioactivity from materials released from upstream wastewater treatment facilities. In addition, researchers from the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public Health also found high levels of barium, benzene, chlorides, strontium, and other contaminants at the end of the outflow pipe in excess of state and federal water quality standards. And it should be pointed out that even recycled frac fluid eventually ends up either left in the well, at a wastewater treatment plant, or deep well injected. And as I said, deep well injection is the other currently preferred method to get rid of frac waste fluid. These cause problems in their own right, since many deep well injection wells have leaked into aquifers. Another issue is that they do tend to trigger earthquakes, and links have been shown in many states and countries. And in fact, just last week, the USGS confirmed that the 5.7 magnitude earthquake in Prague, Oklahoma, was triggered just in this way. So what's the current situation? First, even though New York has a de facto moratorium still in place, and by the way, it's kind of odd how New York did this. Instead of saying when fracking came about, should we do this or shouldn't we do this, New York said, yes, let's do this. We'll just figure out where, how much, when, etc. And now it's kind of reversed itself. Now New York is trying to figure out, should we do this? We should have said that at the beginning. So even though we do have the moratorium, we're still being impacted by HVHF. We have drill cuttings, flowback fluid, and other frac waste going into 5 New York State landfills. And because oil and gas exploration and production was excluded from portions of 7 major environmental federal laws in 2005 and earlier, this waste is not treated nor disposed of properly. Instead of being categorized as the hazardous waste it really is, it's classified as industrial or residual waste, which has less stringent requirements. As a result, we're seeing the effects of that mismanagement. For example, the leachate from both the Highland landfill in Angelica and the Chemung landfill is from 9 to 14 times higher in radioactivity than normal background levels, and it's trending upwards. We are also seeing gas infrastructure threatening our environment and health, tourism, and other things. An example of this is the planned storage of natural gas in a salt formation under Seneca Lake, despite area geologists warning that it is unstable and unsuitable for such a purpose. And it should be mentioned that fracking over the border in PA has already polluted streams that flow north into Allegheny State Park. Because of these already occurring impacts and of an increasing body of scientific and other research showing that the high risk to environmental and public health, there are many sources of opposition to fracking. Many whole countries have enacted bans or moratoria on fracking, as have hundreds of regions within other countries. In the United States, a few states and hundreds of counties, cities, and towns in other states have also enacted bans. In New York State, the present count is 178. Actually today, because of Dunkirk, the city of Dunkirk approving a ban last night, 179 municipalities that have enacted bans or moratoria, with an additional 87 currently moving towards enacting one. Over 1,000 businesses in New York have signed on against fracking, and our $60 billion a year tourism and $4.5 billion a year wine industries and others know that clean water and air are vital for New York's long-term successful economic future. And I should point out that the local bans and moratoria make sense, even with the state moratorium in place. First, we don't know when or if the state moratorium might be lifted. The health commissioner said it likely wouldn't be until 2015, but legally, it's possible for that to happen any time. Local bans and moratoria, whether you're for or against fracking, give the control to the local municipality rather than just to Albany. That way you can control it depending on what information comes down the pike. Well, there is no doubt that HVHF directly and indirectly does benefit the economy. There is also no doubt that it doesn't do so to the extent purported. And there's also no doubt that it creates costs, economic, environmental, and health. You've seen some in the speech talks before me, that the industry ignores when touting fracking's benefits. It'll be through informed decision-making from bodies such as this legislature that our area will decide which energy path is best at providing sustainable energy supplies while keeping the environmental and health impacts as small as possible. It's clear to me at this point that HVHF is not the promising path the industry says it is. We've made previous mistakes trusting unsupported and unsupportable industry promises at places like West Valley, and we've learned the hard way from them, I hope. So let's take a better path that uses things other than high-volume hydraulic fracturing. Thank you very much.